The priest died mid-confession, but no one ever saw who was on the other side.
Forgive me.
Now, they say the child still whispers
Forgive
from
me.
inside the booth. The confessional booth in the West Chapel of St. Elora's had been locked since 1897, not because it was broken, not because of termites or wood rot or the crumbling foundation that plagued the rest of the orphanage. It was sealed because Father Alric died inside it. He was taking confession from one of the children. No name ever listed, no record of who. Only a sudden silence. Then the sound of his body slumping forward. They say when the sisters found him, his hand was still raised in the sign of the cross, his mouth wide open, as if he'd heard something terrible in that final breath. Not a heart attack, not poison. His heart simply stopped, like something inside him had been taken, and from that day on, no one opened the booth. Dust covered the lattice. The wood grew darker over time, as if stained from within, but every now and then, late at night, a sound would leak out. Not footsteps, not weeping, whispering, short, breathy, childlike, a voice murmuring something soft and unfinished, a confession without an ending. The other priests refused to go near it. They moved services to the east wing. The sisters began sleeping with crosses beneath their pillows. No one spoke of it until 1913, when a new priest arrived at St. Elora's and made the mistake of opening the door. Father Marius came from Bristol. He was young, clean-spoken, with a strong voice and steady hands. He had no time for superstition, he said, no fear of whispers or ghosts. The West Confessional had been sealed for 16 years when he arrived. The sisters warned him, "There are things we do not question in this house, Father." But Marius believed silence was sin, and so, on the 7th night of Lent, he unlatched the booth and sat inside. The smell hit first, not of rot, but of candle wax, old ink, and something faintly metallic. He waited. Nothing came. No child. No voice. No echo. So he laughed, called it nonsense. But that night, he woke up choking. He claimed he heard breathing inside his own pillow, felt a small hand press over his mouth, and just as he gasped for air, he heard a whisper, "Forgive me, Father. I didn't mean to." The next day, he returned to the booth, and the day after that. By the end of the week, he wasn't delivering sermons. He was recording names in a red leather ledger, names of children no one had seen, names that didn't belong to any records. He said they came to him at night, whispered into his ears while he slept. The bishop visited. Father Marius smiled, shook his hand, and called him by the name of a boy who died 20 years earlier. The ledger Father Marius kept was discovered in his quarters after his collapse. A deep red book, cracked at the spine, filled with childlike script. Not his handwriting, not even close. The pages listed full names, ages, confession dates, and most disturbingly, times of death. Some of the names matched burial records from the nearby cemetery, from as far back as 1871. Others hadn't died yet. Some hadn't even been born. The sisters burned the ledger, but it didn't burn. The ink ran. The cover peeled and blistered, but the book itself would not burn. So they sealed it in a brass box and buried it under the chapel steps. But that night, the whispering came back. Not from the booth, from the walls, from beneath the beds. Some sisters claimed to hear children running down the halls at night. But when they opened the doors, there were only shadows, and the faint creak of the booth door, swinging open. Then Sister Evelyn began speaking in her sleep. She whispered names that hadn't been uttered aloud, and when asked the next morning, she wept. "He told me he didn't mean to do it," she said, "but he did it anyway, and now he's sorry." When they asked who, she simply said, "The boy in the booth." The confessional should have been empty. It had been locked again, nailed shut, cross placed above it, incense burned daily. But when Sister Miriam went to sweep the chapel floors, she saw a bare footprint in the dust, a small one, leading into the booth. Inside, it was clean, too clean, as if someone had been sitting there just minutes before, the cushions still warm, the candle freshly snuffed. And then the smell came again. Ink, metal, ash. She turned to leave, but a voice, quiet and trembling, spoke just behind the lattice. I didn't mean to push her. Miriam fled. She wouldn't speak again for 3 days. They tried to exorcise the booth, but the holy water boiled in the font. The crucifix hanging above it cracked, clean down the middle. That night, every clock in St. Elora's stopped at 3:17 a.m., and the bells rang once, though no one pulled the rope. It said that the boy was one of the first children brought to St. Elora's, an orphan from Wales, unnamed. There's no record, no baptism, no grave. But some believe he never left the booth. He confessed something that couldn't be forgiven, something that trapped him in the space between. He wasn't evil, just a child. But whatever he did, echoes. Every priest who enters the booth hears his voice. Every nun who prays near the west wing dreams of drowning in ink. One priest gouged his own ears out. Another set the confessional aflame, only to find it untouched the next morning, sitting quietly in its place, as if it had never moved, as if it couldn't be harmed, only heard. Now no one enters the West Chapel. The door is barred, the walls blessed weakly, but the whispers still come, especially during storms, and if you lean your head against the old oak, you'll feel it vibrate, like someone is still inside, still speaking, still confessing, still. It said that the boy was one of the first children brought to St. Elora's, an orphan from Wales, unnamed. There's no record, no baptism, no grave. But some believe he never left the booth. He confessed something that couldn't be forgiven, something that trapped him in the space between. He wasn't evil, just a child. But whatever he did, echoes. Every priest who enters the booth hears his voice. Every nun who prays near the west wing dreams of drowning in ink. One priest gouged his own ears out. Another set the confessional aflame, only to find it untouched the next morning, sitting quietly in its place, as if it had never moved, as if it couldn't be harmed, only heard. Now no one enters the West Chapel. The door is barred, the walls blessed weakly, but the whispers still come, especially during storms, and if you lean your head against the old oak, you'll feel it vibrate, like someone is still inside, still speaking, still confessing, still. They found a photograph, tucked into the back of the diocesan registry, behind the marriage licenses and burial records, unlabeled, undated, nearly blank. It showed the West Chapel as it had once been, wooden pews still polished, candle holders gleaming, windows clear of grime. But in the bottom right corner, a child sat on the edge of the confessional bench. He wasn't facing the camera. His shoulders were hunched, his hands folded neatly in his lap. But when the photo was scanned years later, enhanced by digital clarity, they found that the boy cast no shadow, not on the bench, not on the floor, and when they brightened the exposure, his outline grew fainter, as if he wasn't really there, as if he was something the chapel remembered, not something it saw. The priest reviewing the file, Father Call, stared at the image for days. He said he began hearing voices in his office, pages fluttering when no windows were open, the soft scrape of fingernails behind his bookshelf. He started sleeping inside the church. He said it was safer than his home. Then, one Sunday morning, he stood in front of the congregation and held up the photo. "This is the child who never left," he said. "This is why the confessional must stay closed." But when the congregation passed the photo around, one woman gasped. She recognized the child, not from the orphanage, but from her own dream. The night before, she said he was sitting on her windowsill, smiling, asking if he could tell her something. I just need to confess one more thing. They thought it was superstition, that if you sealed the booth, the whispers would stop. But the confessional was not the source. It was the vessel, and vessels can move. The booth from St. Elora's was dismantled in 1987. The parish was condemned, wood salvaged, pews auctioned, stone taken for restoration. But somehow, the booth was never accounted for. Yet over the years, priests in other parishes have made reports. A confessional that appears in blueprints where none was built, a booth door that swings open without wind, a child's voice caught on audio during sermon recordings. In 2003, a cathedral in Yorkshire had its west wing closed indefinitely. Multiple clergy reported hearing breathing from inside a sealed cabinet. When they opened it, it was empty, except for a small red ribbon tied to the door latch, the same kind used in the old St. Elora uniforms. They called it a coincidence, an urban legend that spread through the clergy like a virus. But in 2019, a boy named Peter went missing from Sunday school. No sign of him, no struggle, no prints, no sound. Just a single item left behind in the chapel. A red leather ledger with fresh names written inside. One of those names matched a girl who had not yet been born, and next to that name was the exact time the bells would ring the following Sunday. The booth doesn't stay in one place. It waits for someone to listen, and once you do, once you hear him whisper, he never truly lets you go. There's a space between the bells, a breath, a pause, and if you listen carefully, not to the sound but to what surrounds it, you'll hear the silence breathing. It happened again, this time in Devon, a small countryside church, unremarkable in every way. St. Alwyn's, brick, moss-covered, 8 pews, no working organ, only a confessional tucked into the rear corner, never mentioned in parish blueprints, and never opened until the priest's granddaughter came to visit. Her name was Lydia, 7 years old, polite, quiet, curious. She asked what the little door in the corner was for. "It's for people who feel guilty," the priest told her, "for people who need to be forgiven." She nodded slowly, and the next morning she was gone. No broken glass, no footprints, just a faint trail of red thread leading to the booth. The door was ajar. They found her hours later, curled up inside, asleep. She was unharmed, but changed. She wouldn't speak for a week, only listened, head tilted, eyes half-lidded, like someone whispering too close to her ear. When she finally broke her silence, she said, "He told me his name, but I'm not allowed to say it. If I do, I'll forget mine." They moved the booth into the church's storage cellar. They surrounded it with salt, and for a time, things were quiet. But Lydia began drawing, not stick figures, not houses, ledgers, names, children her age and younger. She handed one to her grandfather one day and asked, "Do you know when Peter's going to die?" "Because I do." The priest burned the ledger, or at least he thought he did. He tore the pages, doused them with oil, and set them alight. The flames roared, hot enough to curl the crucifix nailed to the wall, but the names didn't burn. They shifted, as if the ink was alive, sliding across the page, rearranging into something new. And when the fire died, the book lay open on the floor, its final page blank except for 2 words. "Who's next?" Father Call refused to touch it. He said it hummed when he got too close, a low pulsing sound like blood rushing behind the walls. That night he awoke to find the booth door wide open. No one had keys, no one had entered the church, and there, sitting on the bench, was a boy, barefoot, pale, hands folded neatly in his lap. The boy looked up and smiled. "Would you like to confess, Father? Because I know your name now." The priest fled. He left the chapel lights on, the doors unlocked, his vestments scattered in the aisle. By morning the booth was gone. No drag marks, no splintered wood, just a square of clean dust where it had stood, and the ledger, still warm to the touch, resting on the altar. The last page now held a name. Not the priest's, not Lydia's, not any name they recognized. Just one word. You. The booth may be gone, but the ledger still writes. And if you've made it this far, your name might already be next.
Forgive me.